Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Eleanor Williams. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Eleanor Williams was born on November 26, 2000, and was raised in Barrow-in-Furness, England. This is 2.5 hours north of Liverpool. Eleanor went by the name Ellie. Her parents separated when she was young, and she lived with her mother. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. In November 2017, Ellie went to a house party thrown by a man who in court documents is only referred to by the letter C. While at C's residence, she consumed alcohol and marijuana and became sick. C, as well as other people at the party, called Ellie's mother to pick her up. Her mother took her to a hospital where Ellie claimed that she had been the victim of an assault of a sexual nature perpetrated by C. The police arrested C, but he was released after being interviewed. In January 2018, Ellie stopped cooperating with the prosecution, so the case did not move forward. On May 6, 2019, after Ellie had moved into her own apartment, she called the police and said that she had been the victim of an assault of a sexual nature perpetrated by a man named Jordan Trengrove. She claimed that Jordan came over to her apartment, threatened her with a knife, beat her with a shower head, and assaulted her. Ellie showed the police bruises in an effort to support her claim. In addition to this alleged attack, Ellie claimed that Jordan had attacked her on March 8, 2019, about 2 months earlier. Ellie showed the police social media messages purportedly from Jordan making admissions. Jordan was arrested and denied Ellie's claims. He was soon released on bail. On May 18, 2019, Ellie contacted the police and claimed that Jordan returned to her apartment and attacked her again. He allegedly entered through a door that Ellie did not lock because a friend was coming by. Jordan was once again arrested and continued to deny any wrongdoing. This time, he remained in jail. In June 2019, Ellie was reported missing several times. Each time when the police found her, she was under the effects of drugs or alcohol and had bruises on her body. The police were concerned about her well-being. On June 18, Ellie made allegations about a man named Mohammed Ramzan, who she referred to as Rami. She stated that, several years earlier, she worked at an Indian restaurant owned by Rami. She accused Rami of conducting an assault of a sexual nature against her, as well as arranging for other men to do the same thing. Ellie claimed that Rami took her to parties where there were mostly Asian men. These men had sex with her. Ellie didn't have a choice because she was under the threat of death. According to Ellie, she wasn't the only victim. She supplied the police with the names of 60 girls who were allegedly taken to these parties as well. Ellie had some claims involving international travel. She said that on a trip to Amsterdam, Rami sold her for £25,000, but the deal never went through. He allegedly took her other places outside the UK as well. Rami was arrested and denied the allegations. He was released on bail. Despite the far-fetched nature of Ellie's claims, the police believed her. They thought they had stumbled upon the case of the century. The police put Ellie in a hotel and found her a job. This was to protect her from what they believed to be a secret and massive criminal enterprise operating in Barrow-in-Furness. Despite having made many allegations already, Ellie was not finished. She told the police that on June 30, 2019, when she was in the seaside town of Blackpool, she was driven around to various locations and forced to have sex. The police took Ellie to the town so she could point out specific addresses, but they were surprised when she did not provide them with any concrete information. She had a lot of details before they took her there, but in the town, she was not helpful at all. Eventually, investigators found the hotel where Ellie had stayed on June 30. Video surveillance revealed that she checked in, visited a couple of stores in the area, returned to the hotel, and stayed there. She was never driven around to various locations, as she stated. Officers decided to follow up on those 60 girls who Ellie claimed were victims of Rami. As it turns out, none of the girls were victims. On July 19, 2019, the police paid a visit to Ellie to arrest her based on the false claims that she had made. She appeared to be under the effects of drugs or alcohol and made new allegations. Ellie stated that after she took a train to Preston, a man named Oliver took her to see two Asian men. These men paid Oliver to have sex with Ellie. After returning to Barrow-in-Furness, a man named Salsa took her home. He and another man followed her into her apartment, had sex with her, and Ellie was struck in the face. The police checked video surveillance in Preston. Ellie could be seen encountering Oliver on the street. The couple had a consensual sexual encounter in an alley before going their separate ways. After this, Ellie made her way to the Preston railway station and took a train to Barrow-in-Furness. She exited the train and started walking home alone. She was picked up and driven home by her brother's girlfriend, who just happened to spot her. No one visited her apartment, as she claimed. Ellie Williams was arrested and charged with perverting the course of justice. Jordan Trengrove, who was one of the men Ellie falsely accused, was released from jail on August 1, 2019. When the police confronted Ellie and explained how they knew she had been deceptive, Ellie said that she felt bad about lying and was sorry, but she had an explanation. The people who had offended against her discovered that she had been talking to the police and told her to supply the police with false information. These lies didn't come from Ellie. She was forced to lie by mysterious and non-existent perpetrators. After delivering this nonsensical story, Ellie was released on bail. On May 19, 2020, Ellie's mother contacted the police and said Ellie was missing. The police found Ellie in a nearby field at 10:49 p.m. One of her eyes was swollen and there was a cut on her finger. Not surprisingly, Ellie had a story about how she was attacked. She claimed that she had been picked up in a motor vehicle and taken to a house occupied by 10 Asian men. Many of these men conducted an assault of a sexual nature against her. Ellie was transported to a hospital. On the next day, she was arrested for violating the conditions of her bail. A few days later, the police discovered a hammer with Ellie's blood on it in the field where she was found. Only her DNA was on the hammer. The police believe that Ellie used the hammer to cause her injuries. In October 2022, Ellie went to trial. She was convicted of 9 counts of perverting the course of justice. In March 2023, Ellie was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. She will be eligible for parole on February 12, 2027. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. All of the men who Ellie had accused were cleared of any wrongdoing. Every story she told was a lie. None of the men had anything to do with harming Ellie. The consequences of Ellie's treachery were devastating to these men. The man identified as C in court documents said it was the worst experience of his life and he would never recover. Jordan had been the target of harassment, became isolated, lost his self-confidence, and could not work. Rami was also a target of harassment. His rental property and his vehicle were vandalized. His businesses failed. He had difficulty sleeping and suffered from anxiety. Ellie had specifically mentioned Asian men a few times in her false accusations. This led to many Asian men in the community being harassed. Item number 2, how was Ellie able to be so convincing to the police? How was she able to get innocent men arrested? Here is the strategy that Ellie used to manipulate the police. On social media, Ellie made contact with various men and encouraged them to send sexually charged messages to her. She wanted them to be as raunchy as possible. In her cell phone, Ellie changed the contact information for those men to the men who she was falsely accusing. This made it seem like she was receiving explicit messages from the alleged offenders. When Ellie was being interviewed by the police, she showed them her phone as messages poured in. Ellie also created fake social media accounts in the names of the men she was accusing. Using these accounts, Ellie pretended the men sent her confessions to the alleged offenses. Ellie was a dedicated storyteller. She supplied the police with a lot of false information, describing horrible events with a high level of detail. There was so much detail, the police did not initially believe that Ellie could have made everything up. For some of the allegations, Ellie showed the police bruises and other injuries. Officers doubted that Ellie would have done this to herself, especially because there was no clear upside for her. It wasn't like she was getting money from making these claims. The last part of Ellie's plan involved tapping into the gullibility and sensation-seeking nature of the police. Ellie probably looked up recent stories about serious crimes, which helped her to add details to her lies. She realized how the police are attracted to major crimes, especially those involving vast conspiracies. The way she constructed her narrative was irresistible to investigators. It involved multiple bad actors working together, international intrigue, and brutal offenses. Officers became convinced that they had uncovered an evil conspiracy operating in Barrow-in-Furness. Perhaps they had dreams of fame, like they would be responsible for cracking the big case. This brings me to item number 3. There is no question that Ellie was responsible for harming innocent men. She repeatedly told lies designed to make them suffer. At the same time, however, one could argue that the police bear a lot of responsibility in this case. They gave a tremendous amount of weight to Ellie's statements when they should have been much more skeptical. When officers involved in the case talk about it in interviews, it seems as though their perceptions are a bit distorted. They let themselves off the hook completely, almost like Ellie was a master criminal whose levels of intelligence and competence far exceeded that of the police. They had no chance against her. She was like Lex Luthor. Ellie was always 10 steps ahead of them. She had complete control over their behavior. Their free will was gone. Ellie supplied details in her stories, showed the police bruises, and presented social media posts with confessions. What could the police possibly do in the face of such overwhelming evidence? Well, as it turns out, there's a lot they could have done. It was actually pretty obvious Ellie was lying. Here are a few examples. When Ellie accused Jordan, she used a fake Snapchat account to pretend as though he had made admissions to her. As it turns out, this Snapchat account was created using an IP address associated with Ellie's residence. If the police had only bothered to check, they would have known that Jordan was innocent. When Ellie was accusing Rami of running a massive criminal enterprise, she mentioned 60 girls who allegedly attended parties. The police did not check the story out until later. As I mentioned, they found out that none of those girls were victims. A better tactic would have been to check this before arresting anyone. The most astounding mistake made by the police was their failure to recognize how improbable Ellie's accusations were. What are the chances that one person would be victimized by so many people who were unconnected to each other? Furthermore, she was always allegedly victimized in the same way. It was like Ellie was being attacked all the time. In her apartment, on the street, she wasn't safe anywhere. One officer said something to the effect of, the accusations Ellie made were on a scale that had never been heard of before. If he had just thought about his own statement for a little bit longer, maybe he would have uncovered the truth. If a claim is on a scale that has never been heard of before, maybe that's because the claim is not true. These police officers had no understanding of statistics and probability. They were so gullible that if Ellie had accused them of attacking her, they would have believed her. I could picture an officer saying, well, she has a bruise. I guess I must be guilty. Even when officers figured out that Ellie had been deceptive, some of them still found a way to make her the victim. They wondered if she may have been lying to cover up some truth, a truth about an evil conspiracy. Again, they were buying into these giant conspiracy theories. Investigators simply couldn't let it go. In my opinion, the officers who arrested the innocent people in this case should have been held accountable. There is no excuse for their behavior. Ellie was less like Lex Luthor and more like Dr. Evil. She told these officers what they needed to believe and exposed their lack of critical thinking skills. Item number 4, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Ellie was self-centered, immature, impulsive, vulnerable, insecure, antisocial, manipulative, deceptive, irrational, had low self-esteem, craved admiration, was unwilling to regulate her intake of substances, and had a sense of entitlement. Some of these traits align with the construct of the victim narcissist. Ellie was willing to do anything to gain attention, including playing the victim. She did not care what happened to the men she falsely accused. Whatever emotional pain Ellie experienced, she believed it was so terrible that nothing mattered more than gaining relief. If innocent people had to sit in jail to achieve this purpose, then it was worth it. Everybody in the world should stop what they are doing and completely focus on Ellie. Now moving to my final thoughts. Ellie was successful in harming innocent men because she understood the motivations of the police and the community where she lived. She exploited the tendency of the police to believe in wide-ranging conspiracies and the tendency of her community to harbor racist attitudes. It's like she used their own momentum against them. Her tactics may have been unsophisticated, but they were precisely targeted. Those are my thoughts in the case of Ellie Williams. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.